Hello and welcome to Dominion Allies Release Day. The set is out on Dominion.games and I am going to be going over all of the cards. The rulebook is not out yet. That will be potentially another couple days in coming, unfortunately. So I'm just going to be going over the cards on the client. And if there are any rules clarifications needed, and I don't know, maybe I'll post them in comments on this video or something like that. But for now, we're just going to go through all the cards on the client. I'll try to keep the comments on the cards that we've already seen brief, and just maybe say if I discovered something particularly notable about them while playing with the previews or something like that. But mostly be focusing on the new stuff. So taking it from the top, Bobble, we've already seen. I guess the one thing that I want to say about this is that I think it is on the weaker side. Obviously, it's going to depend on the favors and the ally that you're getting the favors for. But just I don't know, it feels, not that much better than other treasures or actions that are in this same category of, like, candlestick maker or tracker or other things like that, which are not very powerful payload options. I think that's going to be true of Bobble as well, even though there are going to be boards where you're going to need it anyway, and there are going to be boards where the favors are really, really good, but in the general case, it feels like on the weaker side to me. Okay, here's a new card, Sycophant. +1 action, discard 3 cards. If you discarded at least one, +3 coins. Oh, interesting. Okay. When you gain or trash this +2 favors. Okay, so like the idea is if you play this with an empty hand, you don't have to discard anything because you don't have anything to discard, but then you don't get the +3 coins. You gain or trash this +2 favors. Okay, so this has got some similarities to lackeys. Thematically, as well as like the on gain effect. I guess Silk Merchant, of course, is also the one that has the on trash. Man, imagine if lackeys had +2 villagers on trash too. Anyway, so this is going to be another one of those cases where there's a limited amount of favors on the board, although much less limited than Importer. But where in the majority of cases, you don't have the ability to gain these from the trash or return them to the pile. You're going to, max out at around, well, depending on whether there's trashing, between like 10, 20 favors per player, something like that, which is still a lot. It remains to be seen how much that actually is, but it is limited. It's not like Underling where you can just generate as many as you want. As far as like gaining 2 favors, by buying a 2 cost, I don't really know still how to evaluate that. So let's look at the top text. Discard 3 cards. You discarded at least one, +3 coins. So what can we compare this to? We could compare it to Secret Cave, which also has a discard for +3 coins effect, but its duration. Secret Cave also draws you a card. So on the one hand, getting the 3 coins immediately in some ways is better, and in some ways it's worse. The getting it immediately means you can get it every turn, but with Secret Cave, you're more likely to be able to spike a high price point with it. Like, you're not really gonna, if you open with Sycophant and then you play it, that's -1 card from your hand. You discard 3 cards. That's -4 cards from your hand. You got one other card in your hand to combine it with to try to hit 5. If it's a silver, you did it. But if it's not, then you probably didn't. So, whereas Secret Cave, because it's a duration effect, you can hit not only 5, but significantly higher price points than that, potentially. So, yeah, I think this is not going to be great at hitting price points, even though, even though like +3 is a big number, it's still not actually going to be that good at helping you afford things, unless you have some way to discard fewer cards. Like if you could somehow play this and discard 1 card and then get +3 coins, then it's more. Well, if you discard 2 cards, it's more like a Horse Traders. It doesn't give you the +buy, but it gives you +action. But that's not going to be easy to set up, until you have deck control, essentially, because the vast majority of the time you're not going to have few enough, stop cards, few enough, treasures or victory cards in your hand to be able to discard fewer than the full 3 cards. Like in order to do that, you're going to need other disappearing payload, or you're going to need to like draw your deck to the point where you have like you just don't have cards left, period. Like if you're like playing a bunch of cantrips, for example, first, and then you eventually run out of cards to draw with those or something like that. There is, of course, discard for benefit stuff that you could use with this, like Village Green would be the obvious example, Tunnel, things like that. But yeah, I guess my point is that it seems difficult to have this card be something that's generating a lot of economy for you. Like even though +3 looks like a big number, the effect in your hand size is just brutal, and there are going to be times when you can work around that, but it's going to be difficult. Mostly you're probably going to be picking this up for the favors, I would think. The fact that it can get you +3 does mean that if you pick it up early, it's at least not going to prevent you from hitting certain price points. Like specifically if you're interested in picking up 4 costs, then this card is fine. Like even if you see this card with 3 estates and a copper, you're still going to be able to hit 4, right? You discard your 3 estates and you play your copper and you've hit 4. So if you're, if that's the situation, then potentially opening this is good because you get the favors if that's relevant. Yeah, it's definitely a different sort of card than what we've seen before with the top text. There's some things that are kind of similar, but not super similar in Horse Traders and Secret Cave. I guess the non-terminal nature of it is nice, but seems unlikely to actually matter that much, because how often are you going to be wanting to play this before you play other action cards? Like it's going to basically empty your hand anyway. Most of the time you're going to want to play your other actions first before this. So the fact that it has +1 action on it, I think is actually probably less relevant than most other cards that have +1 action. It's interesting that it does have +1 action. I'm not really sure what to make of that. Anyway, yeah, it's a really hard card to evaluate, again, without looking through all the allies. So one of the things that I'll probably want to do before I wrap this up is go back through some of the liaisons once we've seen all the allies. But I want to go through in order, through the cards in order. So I'm going to still do that, even though maybe it would make sense to go through the allies first in some cases. Townsfolk we've already seen. What do I want to say about Townsfolk, if anything? I think I noted in a comment that I misread Elder. I thought that Elder would activate all subsequent of these choose all of your subsequent choose 1 cards to get +1 choice, which would be really good. As it is, it only does it for a card you play, which is a lot weaker, and overall, I think on a lot of boards, Elder is not going to be that good. If the only things you have to combine it with are Blacksmith and Town Crier, and you have to line it up with them, it's not that inspiring to me. I do think Blacksmith is a good card. The ability to use it for the different draw modes, I think, is going to be like, even though, you know, a moat for 3, which is going to be like the most common way for it to increase your hand size, is not that strong. The flexibility to do the DTX and the flexibility to be used as a cantrip when you don't have any terminal space available are both, I think, going to make it a good card. I think it's the best card of the 4 overall. Miller, I don't know. I actually haven't really picked up Miller for whatever reason. Town Crier is not very good, in my opinion. I mean, it's fine. Like, you know, for a 2 cost, the fact that you can play it as a cantrip means it's rarely hurting your deck, but I don't think it's a very strong card. But yeah, I think Blacksmith is kind of the star of the show here. And then Elder, aside from, you know, obviously if you have a card like Steward or something, you know, in your deck that you can line up with Elder, that's going to, you know, make Elder better. But I think in terms of these cards, Elder, you know, if you can line it up with the Blacksmith, that's really where you're going to get your value out of this pile in the absence of other choose one stuff. But then you really want to be making the DTX work. +3 cards, +1 action is good, to be clear, but like the Elder, if you're playing Elder to get the +1 card, +1 action, that card is essentially a silver. So, like, it's not maybe quite as exciting as it might seem in that respect. And so I think if you can play Elder and then do Blacksmith to draw like 3 or 4 cards with the draw to 6 and then do your +1 card + action, or if you have the terminal space to do another +2 cards, then you're really cooking. Augers, I haven't actually played with these that much, so I don't think I have much to say about them that I didn't say before. Yeah, in fact, I don't think I've played with them at all for whatever reason. I just didn't roll any boards, I guess. So I think I'm just gonna move on. Clashes. That has some nice looking flavoring there with that Warlord. All right, so we've got 4 clashes. We've got Battle Plan, Archer, Warlord, and Territory. Battle Plan. 3, can we... Oh, we can do that. Cool, okay. 3 cost, action, clash, +1 card, +1 action. You may reveal an attack card from your hand for +1 card. Ooh. You may rotate any supply pile. Okay, that seems pretty good. A lab for 3. I mean, it's conditional, but like, can Battle Plan find a way? Having an attack in your hand, how demanding of a condition is that? I mean, there's 2 other attacks in this set of cards, so that certainly helps. You're not going to be able to get a ton of these, of course, because there's only 4 in the pile, but I mean, if you fail to line it up, it's hurting your deck's potential, but it's not like harming your deck. You know, it's still cycles. So in that sense, it's similar to Menagerie. Like, the unactivated form is, you know, at least not detrimental to you. I mean, it's obviously going to depend on how many attacks there are on the board. And one thing that's going to be interesting to ask is, are there any spammable attacks that this will combine particularly well with? So, like, one example you know, that you could think of is Scrying Pool, except that, of course, Scrying Pool draws so well that you probably don't really care about being able to draw with Battle Plan at that point. But maybe you do, because it allows you to put more non-action cards in your Scrying Pool deck, and you can draw them with Battle Plan. Maybe. But, you know, another one might be like Skirmisher. If you've got a bunch of Skirmishers in your deck, you can draw with your Battle Plan. If your primary source of draw is cards like Margrave or Rabble, again, those are draw cards anyway, so maybe not super relevant, but it's, or Werewolf, it's still something to potentially consider. If you got a bunch of familiars in your deck because you were trying to curse, same thing with like Old Witch or Witch. Usually you don't have a ton of those, but, you know, on a board where that's the only draw and there's villages, you know, maybe you do. Other spammable attacks, I don't know, but I mean, there's definitely going to be times where you've got a bunch of attacks in your deck. It seems like a good card to me. All right, let's look at Archer. For cost, action, attack, clash, +2 coins. Each other player with 5 or more cards in hand reveals all but one and discards one of those you choose. Oh, the Sniper. All right, so this is most similar to Pillage in terms of the attack effect, where Pillage allows you to pick a card that they have to discard. Archer does a similar thing, except they can save their most precious card. So that's still strong. That's definitely still strong of an attack effect. Like, you having to discard your second best card, you know, if you like, the most simple case would be you have a village and a draw card, village and a smithy, and if you have to discard one of those two, like, that's really damaging. So I think this is going to be a card that you're going to want to play with most of the time, to have at least one copy. The fact that it doesn't stack, well, it could stack if they have some sort of hand size increasing effect, but this is going to be a real hard counter to anything like that. So like Way of the Squirrel, Save. I think there's a liaison that, or not a liaison, an ally that has a similar effect. I forget what it's called, but because if you have 6 cards and you get Archer played on you twice, that's worse than if you had just had 5 cards. So make sure to buy, borrow as much as possible against Archer. Like, your hand will actually be better off for it than if you draw a full 5 cards. You're better off with 4 random cards and having your opponent discard your second best card, I think, in the vast majority of cases. I mean, maybe not if you're top decking 5 Alchemists, but anyway. Yeah, so this is a card you're definitely going to want to play with. +2 coins, you know, that's fine. But yeah, the attack effect is really powerful, and the ideal case, like, if you are combining this with other hand size attacks, is that you play Archer until they're down to 4 cards, which, I mean, if they have, you know, somehow have like 7 or 8 cards in hand, like, you're not obviously going to knock them all the way down, because you're probably not going to have 4 Archers to play or be able to play 4 Archers, but if they have 6 cards, you know, you want to play 2 or whatever, and then you could play some other hand size attack that knocks them down to 3, potentially still would stack with this. I mean, I don't know that that's super important, but it's something to keep in mind, that this only affects people with a hand size of 5 or more, but there are other effects that would knock them from 4 down to 3 that you could combine this with to make it, you know, just a little bit more painful, or combine it with Legionary, which will also knock them down to 3, but, you know, in the interim will knock them down to 2, but without the second best card. So, like, they get to keep the first and third best cards instead of first and second best cards, which is pretty brutal. Yeah, seems like a good card to me. All right, Warlord. Also an action. At the start of your next turn, +2 cards. Until then, other players can't play an action from their hand that they have 2 or more copies of in play. Whoa! And this is an attack duration, or sorry, action duration attack clash. Quad type. Courtiers rejoice. Although some people were saying that, you know, there were going to be some 4-type cards in this set, but that maybe Courtier in general prefers 3-type cards, so that the gold gaining isn't required, and I could see that being the case. Anyway, this card seems insane. Like, not necessarily good, like, all the time, but in some cases, like, absolutely bonkers. You can't play an action from your hand that you have 2 or more copies of in play. So you can play it other ways. And this is something I didn't talk about with Voyage because I didn't process it. But with Voyage, if you play like a throne room, and if you like do like throne action, and you've got like 3 more throne plays available, or no, 1 more throne. What am I talking about? Throne action, you could do another throne play, except you can't because you're blocked by Voyage. But if you do like Herald or Vassal stuff and you're playing stuff from the top of your deck, you know, go nuts. There's no limitation on that. The same thing is true of Warlord. So it's specifically from your hand. Now, of course, the vast majority of the time, that's where you're playing your cards from, right? So it's not that much of a consolation. But, you know, if you do have a deck like that, then you can get around some of the Warlord's effect. But as it is, like, you know, think about, you know, any deck that has a bunch of the same village, a bunch of the same draw card, you know, a bunch of peddlers. Like, oh my gosh, this attack is insane. Like, this shuts down so many things. And there are enough of them in the pile that you can have, you know, 1 in play every turn, like just barely if both players are competing for it, but you can do it. Now, I guess the thing about that is that if you have Warlords in play, if both players have Warlords, you know, in play every turn, then it starts to become hard to have Warlords in play every turn, because, like, how are you drawing your deck when you can't play more than 2 of any action? I mean, there may be cases where you can do it, but it's going to be really hard because you have to have so much variety in like what cards you're playing. You know, a maximum of 2 of any village or any draw card, you know, any cantrip, whatever, like your deck is, or your hand is going to get essentially junked with good cards. It's going to be really awkward. I'm trying to think. I mean, to me, this feels like, I guess Old Witches is probably the other attack that has been printed recently that's like quite strong. This, I mean, Old Witch is probably stronger than this in practice because it's immediately available. Whereas Warlord is not going to be immediately available, and the effect of Warlord is not going to matter as much in the early game, which is generally like a higher leverage time for something like that compared to Old Witch, which, you know, as soon as you start cursing, is doing work. But the brutality of this attack, though, man, like, it's been a long time, I feel like, since we've seen an attack printed that had like this kind of effect on, you know, what an opponent could do. That is a serious attack. Wow. All right. And then we've got Territory. Worth 1 point per differently named victory card you have. When you gain this, gain a gold per empty supply pile. Okay. Well, 1 VP per differently named victory card you have is a design niche that I'm surprised hasn't already been filled, actually. Like, yeah, I mean, it's like, that's feels like something that we would have like already expected to see by now, but we haven't, and so now we've got it in territory. So, you know, the base case with territory is that it's worth 4 points, probably, because you've got territory, estate, duchy, province. And that's actually pretty good already for 6 coins. Like, if you compare that to Fairgrounds, for example, like, that's frequently worth 4 points as like a benchmark. You can make them worth 6. If they're worth 2, they're bad. You can almost always make them worth 4. If you can make them worth 6, like, that's really good, but that's usually pretty hard to do. So yeah, I mean, I'd be pretty happy with 4-point territory. And then, you know, 5-point territory isn't going to be that unusual. Obviously, like, you could keep around an overgrown estate to do that. You could have like any other, basically any other green card at all. You know, whether it's, you know, something like Mill or Nobles, or, you know, just like Tunnel or Fairgrounds, Silk Road, like anything, Island. You know, you just need one of those. This is worth 5 points, and then it's really efficient at that point. Like, compared to Province, arguably 6 or 5 points for 6 coins is more efficient than 6 points for 8 coins. Arguably, I mean, getting more points is more efficient in the sense of like points per card. So that's going to be the case, but still, like, you know, it's really good once it's getting up to 5 points, and it's not going to be uncommon at all for that to happen. And then anything above that, obviously, is just going to be amazing. So this seems like pretty good alt VP. I mean, the biggest limiter on it is there's only 4 in the pile, so you can't like build your entire strategy around winning just off of territory, probably, because there's just not going to be enough of them, like, compared to provinces. I mean, obviously, if you win on a pile out, then, you know, great. But trying to say, you're not going to be able to build around just playing for territory the way that you might build around just playing for like Vineyard, right? Like, you can take some and then try to pile out, but if you're having to go all the way through the provinces or something, you're going to have to pick up some provinces, because territory by itself is not going to do enough unless there is just an absolutely bonkers number of victory cards on the board. And then the on-gain effect, I don't know what to make of that exactly. Like, sometimes that'll be good, sometimes it won't. Probably more often it'll be good to be getting them, but how often are you going to be picking up territory with empty supply piles? I guess probably fairly often, because it is a victory card. It's at the bottom of the split pile, although I think split piles in general are going to decrease the number of empty piles by virtue of the fact that they themselves are hard to empty. Like, even if you take 4 territories, probably there's something else left in the clash pile, so, you know, that's not going to be an empty pile. I assume, actually, an interesting thing to know, though, would be if you take the last territory and it's also the last card in the clash pile, how many golds do you get? Do you get a gold for that empty pile? Like, is it considered empty at the point where you gain it? I don't know. I don't think that's ever really come up before. But I guess it will now. I guess I would lean slightly towards saying no, you don't get a gold for that, but we'll find out at some point. But either way, I mean, putting golds in your deck when you're greening is usually nice, but I could definitely see that being annoying in some cases. You know, you can try to manage when you pick this up to juggle, like, you know, how much do I want the gold? How much gold do I want? But you could also actually compare it, I suppose, to having like a horde in play, or buying provinces with Haggler and taking golds off of them. Like those are similar-ish situations. Yeah. So in any case, gold aside, like regardless, you know, if you're never getting any gold or you're getting gold that you don't want, whatever, the actual victory point value of this card, I think, is quite good. So this seems like a really strong pile to me overall. Battle Plan looks good, Archer looks good, Warlord looks insane, and Territory looks good too. So clashes. And now we've got forts, starting with Tent. 3 cost action, +2 coins. You may rotate the forts. When you discard this from play, you may put it onto your deck. Okay, so this is another one of our recursive cards, like Merchant Camp. But unlike Merchant Camp, it doesn't give you an action. It's just a terminal silver. It rotates the forts, okay, but I mean, at first glance, this seems not good. Terminal silver is usually not exciting if it's not doing anything else. I mean, other than rotating the forts, this isn't. If there's some reason to want to rotate the forts like all the time, I guess this could be good. We'll find that out in just a moment. But my first impression of this is pretty weak. Next, we've got Garrison. +2 coins. This turn, when you gain a card, add a token here. At the start of your next turn, remove them for +1 card each. This is a 4 cost. Action duration fort. Okay, so I don't know what token here means, if it matters. Like, is this set going to ship with, you know, coin tokens or what exactly? But putting that aside, when you gain a card, you add a token, and then the next turn you draw a card. So this is like it's like Triumph for draw. You put this into play and you just gain all the cards, and then you draw all the cards. Amazing. Every stop card that you add, every stop card that you gain, the stop cardness of it is going to be, you know, somewhat offset by Garrison the following turn. Just the following turn, right? So like it's not, you know, gonna let you add just like an infinite number of stop cards to your deck and be fine. But it is kind of a cool interaction where, I mean, obviously you might not actually draw those specific cards, but you know, the fact that Garrison essentially like makes the stop cards you're gaining draw neutral for a turn is pretty cool. And then obviously if you gain some draw cards with it, then you know you can end up adding like some draw and some stop cards and you know, to a deck where you would otherwise not be expecting to draw a deck, and then you can end up drawing deck anyway because of the Garrison effect. But how often is this actually going to be good? I don't know. I mean, I guess unlike say Livery, it is unbounded by cost. So, you know, you don't really have to worry about what it is you're gaining. I can imagine situations where you do actually want to just gain like literally anything in order to trigger this effect, because you've got, like, I don't know, you've got Watchtower, you play Garrison, you buy a bunch of stuff, you Watchtower trash it, and then you just like turn your Garrison into draw. That could be a thing. The Garrison Watchtower Goons Wombo combo that needs a ton of villages, I guess. But yeah, it's terminal draw, but it's only it's terminal. It's not terminal on the turn that you actually get the draw. It's terminal on the turn you play it. So I don't know. It's this is a tough one for me to evaluate. It also gives you +2 coins for what that's worth. It seems like a really interesting card. I think it'll be really cool to play with. I don't really know how to evaluate the power of it, but I think decks that can make this work will be fun at the very least. I'll put it that way. Next up, we've got Hillfort. Gain a card costing up to 4. Choose one. Put it into your hand. +1 card or +1 action. Okay, so we've got a workshop variant that has a more flexible bonus than, say, Ironworks, but is comparable to Ironworks in terms of what those bonuses are. It's like Ironworks, you gain an action, you get an action. You gain a victory card, you get a card. There is no put it into your hand. It's if you gain a treasure, you get a coin. But I still think that's like the most comparable thing here. Hillfort's more expensive, and in return for that, you can always take plus action, or always take plus card, or always put the card into your hand. The putting it into your hand, of course, is pretty comparable to Sculptor, which always does that, and then also gives you a villager if you gain a treasure. By comparison, Hillfort can always be non-terminal, but not if it's putting the card into your hand. Unless, of course, you've got Elder, but, yeah, I mean, as workshop variants go, this seems good but expensive, I guess. Like, you're gonna take plus action a fair amount of the time, just because like having more terminal space is valuable. But you're not going to want to take plus action if you can help it. I think, put it into your hand is like +1 card, except that +1 card is the card that you gained instead of some other card, which a lot of the time is going to be preferable. So I think I could see put it in your hand being sort of like a dominant choice over +1 card in a lot of cases. Obviously, there are going to be times when you would rather gain some card but draw your from your deck rather than draw the card that you're gaining, depending on what it is you're gaining and what your position in the turn is. Like, for example, if you've got a bunch of treasures coming up and this is the last action that you're going to play in your turn, you gain a village, but you don't want to draw the village. You want to draw like some treasure or a green card off your deck or whatever. But I think a lot of the time you're going to want to put the card into your hand over just drawing some other card. Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty good. Like, I think it's probably worse than Sculptor, but not much worse, probably. The villagers that Sculptor can be really nice, or the villagers that Sculptor gives you can be really nice, but the fact that they're conditional on gaining treasures can be a pretty big limitation. The ability for Hillfort to give you an action instead of putting the card into your hand is in some cases going to be better than Sculptor. But overall, I think it's gonna, like, Sculptor is a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, this is a solid card. Obviously, there's the combination with Garrison. You play a bunch of Hillforts, gain some cards. And then you get tokens on your Garrison, you draw the next turn. That's fun. And then we've got Stronghold, an action duration victory fort. Another quad type. Let's go. Choose one. +3 coins. Or at the start of your next turn, +3 cards. And it's worth 2 VP. Okay. So the comparison that jumps out to me is with Nobles, actually. Like, Nobles can draw you 3 cards as well, but it can do it right now. It can't gives you +3 coins, but I don't know how much I would care about that. Like, I think basically where I'm going is I think Nobles is a better card than this. There are going to be cases where the not the terminal, but the duration +3 cards are better than the Nobles +3 cards because you don't have great deck control, and having the, you know, like the Haunted Woods type draw where you're not worried about drawing stuff dead. Like, you don't have a, it's not easy to line your villages up with your, you know, with your actions, so not having to worry about drawing your stuff dead is better. But most of the time, you'd rather draw the cards now than later. And the +3 coins, I mean, the Necropolis effect on Nobles, you know, sort of taken in isolation is not very strong. But I think as flexibility goes, that is generally going to be better than the +3 coins. Like, I would rather have the cards now than later most of the time, but I would also rather have the cards than the coins most of the time. So, like, the +3 coins option doesn't look very good to me for the most part. That being said, being worse than Nobles is not like that bad. I mean, Nobles isn't like the greatest card ever, but it is a victory card, and being a victory card means there's going to be reason to buy this, even if it's not like the most efficient way to, you know, add to, like, to build up your deck. You're still getting some VP for it, and that's going to synergize with some other things. So, you know, I certainly think Stronghold will see play, and the, you know, the duration +3 cards could definitely be nice. Even though in general I would, you know, I was saying I'd rather have the draw now than later. Like, having some duration draw can be a very, very nice effect and a good way to ensure reliability, and something Stronghold can do for you. So, you know, I think it's still a pretty solid card. Overall, I am confused about the role of Tent in this. There does not seem to be any particular reason that you would care to rotate the forts all the time. And so I don't really know why you would want to top deck Tent. Yeah, I don't get that. So still not seeing that as like a particularly valuable effect or card, but I guess we shall see. But let's move on. All right, Importer we have seen before. I will just say that there's some pretty crazy things that can emerge as the result of starting with the extra 4 favors. One thing that I had, for example, was City State, which is the favor or the ally where you spend 2 favors to play an action card that you've gained, you know, this turn or something like that. And so I had a board where I like turn 1 bought Importer, used City State to play the Importer. Turn 2, the duration effect goes off. I gain a card costing up to 5, which I then also City State innovated, and that was the end of my favors. But like, that was already like a way of getting a 5 cost into play before my first shuffle, which is, you know, pretty bonkers. So there's some bonkers stuff that can come out of this. I suppose that's probably not too surprising, but yeah. Merchant Camp we've already seen. I don't think I really have anything new to say about this. It's a mostly worse, but also sometimes better fishing village. Odysseys we have seen before. Let's see. I guess I want to say about this. Voyage is really awkward. I still think it has its uses, but I think it's also probably a card you're not going to want to add to just any old deck. There's going to be a lot of decks where it's mostly just something that's decreasing your hand size. It does, however, synergize with Sunken Treasure pretty well. That's something to keep in mind. The thing is, you have to find the Sunken Treasure, though. And you can't do much sifting on your voyage turn. Distant Shore, quite nice with Trash for Benefit. I probably had mentioned that before, but it is. Yeah, alright. Sentinel. 3-cost action. Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You may trash up to 2 of them. Put the rest back in any order. Good. This is like Sentry at Home, I guess. I mean, it's more likely to find the cards you want to trash, but it's terminal. And it doesn't get to discard anything. But yeah, I'm opening this for sure. Like, it's going to have that same problem of you keep drawing this card that you want to trash like in your hand, and then you can't trash it with your Sentinel. But being able to look at 5 cards instead of 2 is going, or 3, I guess in the case of Lookout, is going to help with that problem for sure. This card's good. Like, I'm just, yeah. It's a trasher. It's a multi-card trasher. It's going to help you cycle. Like, if you open this with like a silver, and I'm not necessarily saying that you should, but just by way of illustration, as long as you find this turn 3 or turn 4, if you're presumably going to trash 2 cards, like, why wouldn't you? Because you're going to look at 5 of them, so it's not like, oh, I saw my silver, I can't trash. Like, no, you see 5 cards, like, you're going to get to trash. So you have a 12-card deck, you trash 2 of them, you're back to a 10-card deck. Clean shuffle. Yeah, good stuff. Underling, not much new to say about this. I mean, it's, it does, kind of what I thought, which is, if you need favors, it can get you a lot of them. If you don't, then you probably don't care about Underling. Pretty straightforward. Just, it's all down to the ally. Wizards, this pile is one of the crazier ones for sure. Student does trash very quickly, but is really anti-tempo. So I think it's going to be best if you can combine it with either like something like Alms or something like, even if you combine it with like a Traveler and you're thinking like, oh, I get to thin down a bunch and that will help me accelerate my Traveler. The problem is that like top decking the Student every turn is also slowing down the rate at which you get through your deck. So like for any not just literally Travelers, but like any effect where you want to cycle through your deck quickly to see some key card or cards over and over, like, it is thinning, and that does help, but on the other hand, it is also slowing down the rate at which you see those key cards. So yeah, something like Alms, where you don't really care about having low economy, could definitely help. And then maybe, if all you want to buy is cheap stuff, I mean, that would help as well. Or I don't know. I'd have to think about that more. Like, what else will work well with Student? I'm not really sure offhand. It's like it's because it's. I mean, it's about as anti-tempo as it gets. Like, I guess it's kind of comparable to Catapult in that sense. Like, it wants to trash treasures like Catapult does. It doesn't do a hand size attack, but because you're playing it like every turn instead of every other turn-ish, you're effectively hand size attacking yourself every turn instead of sometimes having it be your opponent that's hand size attacking you. So that's, if you think about Now, I mean, it's not attacking your opponent, so like that part is definitely, you know, weaker. But if you think about the impact on your own deck, it's comparable to Catapult in that sense. Because it's not attacking, it's not as good as Catapult, arguably. So again, you have to wonder, like, what are the favors and, you know, what are you doing with that? But yeah, very anti-tempo. I believe the ruling on Sorcerer is that if they have no card to reveal, they do get a curse. Then, of course, after that, they'll have the curse to reveal, so they won't get curse. Unless you can, I don't know, draw them the card with some effect, Council Room or something. Lich, forget what I talked about exactly, but just in case I didn't clarify on this, Lich is going to skip, like, it stacks. So it's going to skip all of the turns. If you like King's Court it, you play a bunch of Liches, whatever, you're going to skip so many turns. So, you know, be very cognizant of that. Oh, I also got the trash effect on this wrong in my video. I was thinking you just gain a cheaper card. I think that'd be stronger. But Lich gains cards from the trash, which I found to be pretty awkward to make use of. Because you got to get something into the trash first. And there's nothing in here that like really does that effectively. Like Student can trash things, but doesn't care about trashing like action cards, for example. Doesn't get any benefit out of that. So like, why are you doing it? You know, obviously if you happen to have some other trash or benefit thing, you know, that can work out. But just sort of taking the pile by itself, the synergy isn't like really there. Anyway, all right. Broker we've seen before as well. Broker's real awkward to gain favors with, in my opinion. It's really hard to pass, like, to take favors over coins or cards. You're gonna need to do it sometimes, but it's really rough. And then it's really sad when you have to take action. Carpenter. This is a new one. 4-cost action. If no supply piles are empty, +1 action, and gain a card costing up to 4. No supply piles are empty. Okay. Otherwise, trash a card from your hand and gain a card costing up to 2 more than it. Okay, so this is a non-terminal workshop that turns into a remodel when a supply pile empties. So it's kind of supposed to be putting the brakes on a pile out, I guess. Is you like can spam some pile until it's empty, but then whoa, slow down there. You know, now the Carpenter's terminal, and you know, it can still gain cards at effectively the same rate because, you know, you can just remodel the card, you know, like whatever into some other pile and pile that way, but it's going to be a lot harder, obviously, than just gaining the cards. Harder on your hand size, harder on your terminal space, etc. But in terms of how strong this is, I mean, it's basically Ironworks until a supply pile empties, and then it absolutely is a remodel after that point. Like, there's no difference between this card and remodel once there's a supply pile empty. So it's comparable to those cards with the caveat that remodel, like one of remodel's use cases is getting rid of your estates, and this card is not going to be very good at that because you want to get rid of your estates already, like before a supply pile empties. So, yeah, I think, I mean, there are going to be differences between this card and Ironworks, obviously. Like, if you want to gain treasures with it for some reason, that's going to be different. Or victory cards, that's going to be different. But, you know, a lot of times you're using cards like this to gain action cards, and that's the benefit Ironworks gives you. So it's going to be very comparable. I mean, to me, it seems like a good card. Like, Ironworks is, you know, a solid enough card. Remodel is a pretty solid card, and I think despite the lack of like early estate trashing on this card, I think the overall effect is actually like probably beneficial compared to, at least compared to Ironworks. So one of the problems you can run into with cards like Ironworks is you pick up the Ironworks and you gain, your 4-cost village or draw card or whatever with it, and then the pile empties, and then there's not necessarily anything that you want to gain with the Ironworks. I mean, sometimes there is. Sometimes there's a ton of piles that you want to gain cards from with it, but there are those situations where there's only really one or maybe 2 piles that you want to gain from, and at least in those situations, Carpenter turns into something else that's maybe more useful than the Ironworks mode. On some boards, that's going to be a bad thing. But on some boards, it's going to be a good thing. And, late game remodel is definitely like a powerful payload card. And, there are plenty of boards where you have better trashing than remodel early. You don't really want to use remodel to trash your estates because you've got better options. Or even if you would want to use remodel to trash estates, you have better options, and the opportunity cost of taking a remodel isn't worth it compared to what else you want to add to your deck at that point. But Carpenter is like, hey, you're going to have a remodel in your deck. Don't worry about it. Like, you can turn those golds into provinces. It'll be fine. So, I don't know that it makes any sense to say it's like going to be consistently better than either one of Ironworks or remodel, but it will definitely, have its cases where it can be better than them, and it's at the very least going to be comparable to them overall, and those are solid cards. So I think this will be a solid card. I think it'll be interesting to see how the strategy develops around this. Courier, we've already looked at before. I only played one game with this. It was I think I played 2. One of the games had Scrying Pool, and it was interesting because I ended up discarding actions with Scrying Pool so that I could then play them with Courier. Because otherwise Courier would be terminal, but it wasn't terminal if I could find something to play with it. So that was something I'd never had to consider before. There was another deck that I played that was just it was with Ironmonger, and so then I was it was the same thing. I would discard the actions with Ironmonger so that I was had more options to play with Courier. So Courier definitely makes you do some things that you wouldn't normally do, which is cool. Was it worth it? I don't know. Maybe not, but it was fun. Innkeeper, 4-cost action, +1 action, choose one, +1 card, or +3 cards, then discard 3 cards, or +5 cards, then discard 6 cards. Oh my gosh, okay. So this is going to give you some sifting. And how much sifting, the more sifting you get, the worse it is for your hand size. If you don't want any sifting, you can just use it as an empty cantrip. But yeah, I mean, if you're doing that, it's not doing anything for you. So unless you've got adventurous tokens, but you really don't want to be doing that. +3 cards, +3 cards, discard 3 cards. That's warehouse straight up. +5 cards, discard 6 cards. That's we haven't seen that large of a sifting effect I can think of. So I think there's a couple of use cases for this. First of all, I want to say, the +5 cards, then discard 6 cards. I think in general that actually is the strongest effect on the card, even though it's negative to your hand size. Obviously there are going to be decks where you don't want to do that because all you want to be doing is increasing your hand size, not decreasing it. But first of all, in the early game, plus 5 cards, then discard 6 cards, you are going to find that card you're looking for. Your Trasher, your Traveler, your Junker, whatever. Like, the Innkeeper's gonna find it for you. Like, it's just a crazy amount of cycling. And then the other thing is that that will combine quite well with Draw to X, not just because it decreases hand size by 2, which it does. Like the warehouse mode will decrease hand size by 1, and then the super mode will decrease hand size by 2. But also because it's going to find your Draw to X cards for you, or even, in the case of needing to play a terminal Draw to X card, it's going to find your village and your Draw to X card. So, like, I mean, I probably want a bunch of these in my Draw to X decks. But, on in a non-Draw to X context, like taking one of these in the early game to like find some key card very rapidly, trigger a bunch of shuffles, like that seems like a really strong effect. I think this will get opened quite often, depending on what you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to just buy a 5, then you probably aren't going to want to open Innkeeper, although you might want to pick one up on the second shuffle, like buy your 5 and an Innkeeper, and then go from there. But if what you want to do is you want to play Priest over and over, or if, like I said, you want to play your Traveler over and over, if you have, there aren't very many like really good sub 5 cost Junkers that you would be combining this with in the opening, so probably not so much that. But yeah, this card actually seems really, really good to me. Despite how kind of unassuming it is. Royal Galley. So we talked about this already. I guess a couple things to say about it. First of all, when Royal Galley sets a card aside, it's not in play. I learned that when I played a Royal Galley Goons deck and was like, wait a minute, why did I only get 1 VP chip for this buy? Whoops. So that's something to keep in mind with any card that has like a while this is in play effect below the line, like a Highway, Goons, I guess not Merchant Guild anymore, Haggler, cards like that. You do get the effect the following turn. It like comes into play for the duration turn, but the turn that you play it with the Royal Galley, it doesn't. And then other than that, this is a village effect on the duration turn. So like if you are playing like that same board where I had the Goons, this was the only village, and so I could get a maximum of 6 Goons into play with 10 Royal Galleys, which I had because I was playing against Lord Rat. So like you can you can build a deck that has some a decent amount of terminal space with this as your only village, which may not like be totally obvious from like reading the card text, or maybe it is totally obvious and not telling anybody anything they don't already know. But yeah, just but it only it's only on the duration turn that you're getting a village effect, so that is something to pay attention to. And then we've got Town, which we've also seen before. There's really not too much to say about this one. Quite nice with Elder, of course, and then opening Woodcutter isn't exactly exciting, but if you like don't have, if you're going to open with some kind of silver variant on 4 anyway, being able to have it also be a village, which not only means it can, you know, decollide if you open with some other terminal on 3, but also just, you know, like you have a village in your deck, like, you know, is a lot better than most village opens. Still not like a great open, but it's, you know, it's something. All right, I'm going to pause here and take a little break. Be right back. Okay, I am back, and before I continue with the next card, I had a thought that I wanted to share about territory. I had mentioned, you know, it seems surprising that this, you know, card didn't already exist. Not the below the line stuff, but the above the line stuff. Like, this seems like a sort of natural like thing to care about for a VP card. But it occurred to me while I was taking my little break that perhaps the reason this is part of a split pile is because it's it would be difficult to have a full pile of these that was priced appropriately. Like I was talking about, you know, man, this is really good value for a victory card, and maybe that's exactly the problem with having it be its own pile, is that, you know, it would too frequently be dominant as a source of victory points, where you'd have to price it, you know, up, but then like conversely on the boards where it was the only victory card other than the basic ones, then, you know, it would be too expensive and it might be hard to balance that. But as a part of a split pile, it's like, yeah, there's only 4 of them, it's fine. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the thought process there anyway, or, you know, maybe it's not. But anyway, let's move on to Barbarian. 5 cost action attack, +2 coins. Each other player, trashes the top card of their deck. If it costs 3 or more, they gain a cheaper card sharing a type with it. Otherwise, they gain a curse. Oh, I don't think I'm going to enjoy this one. I don't know if I've mentioned, there are 3 cards on my ban list. One of them is Possession, which is, you know, Possession is insane and was you know, sort of auto banned for a long time anyway. Whatever. The other 2 are Swindler and Knights. So yeah. This has the Locusts effect. Basically, not exactly. It costs 3 or more. You get a cheaper card sharing a type, as opposed to Locusts is, if it's, I forget the exact wording, but it's like you gain a curse if it's a copper or an estate, I think, specifically, and otherwise it's a card with a cheaper, something like that. Anyway, so yeah, this is, I guess, not as brutal as Knights, but when it trashes 5 of my 6 Heralds, I'll still be really salty, so I probably won't want to play with this very much. I mean, there aren't that many of these cards in the game, and so I'm not gonna, like, you know, you know, people enjoyed playing with this sort of card. I'm not gonna begrudge them they're fun. I've got room on my ban list, but I mean, I'll play with it at least initially and see if I think it's, you know, more fair than Knights. One important difference between this card and Knights, though, I will say, is that you can win the Barbarian War if there is one, without needing to win like the Barbarian split. You can just, if your Barbarians hit their Barbarians, they lose their Barbarian, right? So where the Knights self-trash, and that kind of helps mitigate the damage that they're doing. You know, your Barbarians could just like trash all their Barbarians, and now like yours can just run roughshod over their deck. So I mean, there also isn't the top end cost mitigation. It's not a card from 3 to 6. It's just a card that costs 3 or more, so they can trash your provinces into duchies and all of that. So yeah, I expect to end up banning this card quickly, but I will give it a shot. The off chance that for whatever reason it doesn't feel as bad as Knights, which seems hard to believe, but who knows. All right, next up we've got Capital City. 5 cost action, +1 card, +2 actions. You may discard 2 cards for +2 coins. You may pay 2 coins for +2 cards. All right. So for just the village effect, obviously this is pretty expensive. If you, let's assume that you're gonna use both halves of the sifting effect. You're gonna discard 2 cards for 2 coins, and then you're gonna pay 2 coins for 2 cards. How does that look for a 5 cost village that goes +1, essentially goes plus, well, you have to discard the cards first though. That's awkward. Seems on the weak side to me for a village as a consequence of that. You can pay coins for cards without doing the discard, so it can be +3 cards, +2 actions, but you have to pay 2 coins for it. I assume that if you have no virtual coin available to you, you can't just pay 2 coins. Like, you can't like go into the, I mean, it's not debt, right? Like, there is no debt mechanic in this set, but like that you can't run a deficit. I don't know how to describe it other than saying go into debt. You know, that you've got to have some source of virtual coin in order to do the draw. Which is, you know, a limited form of storyteller draw, I suppose. But without the ability to use treasures for it. I mean, in a little limited capacity, what this can do is turn your peddlers into labs. So if you play 2 peddlers and then you play this, then and you just use the draw mode, you've essentially converted your 2 peddlers into labs. So it's like a kind of also like a limited form of Way of the Chameleon. Not that Way of the Chameleon ever makes you discard cards, but if you're taking coins instead of cards, there's a sort of analogous behavior there. But yeah, I think like I think this is a little expensive for what it's doing. But on the other hand, if you have a source of virtual coin, like turning that into draw could be really good. I mean, so maybe it's not actually like another example would be like you play a festival and then you play this and you've essentially, again, you've chameleoned the festival's 2 coins into 2 cards. And then you have a Lost City with +buy on it. But to do that, you've had to play a 5 cost vanillage. Like, how much would you pay for the Way of the Chameleon effect? Normally you don't have to pay for it at all, it's just there. Yeah. I think the fact that this is competing in the 5 cost slot is going to be a problem for this card. That can often be the case for 5 cost villages. But even so, being able to turn coins into draw probably is going to be worth it in cases where you have either you know, like a fair amount of stop card virtual coin, but not a ton of draw, or you have peddlers, but not a ton of draw. Like being able to convert that into draw. I mean, you know, I'm saying that like, oh, you know, you can turn your peddler into a lab, or you turn your, you know, festival into Velocity or whatever. But maybe I shouldn't be giving the credit to those cards exactly. Like, if you give the credit to the capital city and you say like, oh, the capital city is giving you this draw. I mean, which to some extent it obviously is, because it's giving you the effect. Like, it does look pretty good at that point. This is a tough one to evaluate for sure. And in some cases, obviously, you're just going to go, okay, I have like some junk in my hand, I'm going to discard it, and then I'm going to, you know, get the coins, then I'm going to use that to draw 2 more cards. And that'll be useful. But yeah, I think the value of this card is going to be probably pretty dependent on what kind of virtual coin is available on the board and how much value you get out of turning that into draw. One thing that's going to be potentially awkward with this is that you do actually have to discard cards to get the coins back. So, like, unlike Way of the Chameleon, where you can turn all your coins into draw early in the turn, draw your deck, and then start turning your draw into coins at the end, it doesn't quite work that way with Capital City, because you actually have to discard. So you can't just sort of do that repeatedly, and the Capital City won't be the card that you're playing at the end of the turn, probably, because it's a village. So it's going to be hard to get the payload back out of your deck if you're using this card to turn payload into draw. So that might be a limitation, but certainly an interesting card. I'm not clear on how well it will perform. All right, next up we've got our very first treasure duration card. I think we didn't get one of those in the split piles, did we? I don't think so. This is all actions. This is all actions. This is not any treasures, at least. This is, we got the victory duration, which is, I think is the only victory duration. There's Distant Lands is a victory, whatever the Tavern Mat type is. Reserve. Yeah, we didn't get any in the split piles. Yeah, so this is our very first treasure duration. Treasure duration liaison at that. +2 coins, +1 favor. You may set aside an action from your hand to play it at the start of your next turn. Cool. So this is actually a village too. It's not even just like a, like, you know, Way of the Turtle is a village, but like you do have to, there does have to be some turn where you like spend your terminal space on Way of the Turtle in order to get the village effect later, or like same thing with Tactician or whatever. This just is a village, which is fun. We don't have many treasures that act as villages. Coin of the Realm and Crown come to mind, but the way that they do that is pretty different too. The fact that this generates a favor, you know, we'll have to look through the allies, see how good that is, and whether you're going to want to pick this up even if you're not using the duration effect. It is worth noting that if you don't use the duration effect, this isn't going to stay out. So, like, if you want to be generating favors, then you potentially don't want to set stuff aside with this. But yeah, this seems like a really cool card. I mean, it's expensive for a village, admittedly, but like, it's very flexible. anything you draw dead, you can play with this the next turn. You can use it for reliability, where you like keep some villages or draw cards or whatever and set those aside. Excuse me. Yeah, I think it's a good card. Like, I think the village effect is going to be pretty strong. And being able to get favors as well probably also is going to be pretty strong. So, yeah, I think this is going to be a good card. Emissary, 5-cost action liaison, +3 cards. If this made you shuffle at least one card, +1 action and +2 favors. Whoa! Wow, that's crazy. Oh, man. Okay, so this is another Smithy variant, 5-cost Smithy variant. But it can actually be non-terminal. It's going to be tough to do that with more than one emissary per turn, that's for sure. Which is probably why it gives you 2 favors rather than just 1. How do you go about... I mean, I guess the common case for this is going to be that it's basically a smithy, and you get villages as normal, and you don't count on any one of these to trigger a shuffle, but then you do, like, hopefully get at least one trigger off on that so that you can generate some favors, and that's mostly what you're going to care about. The +1 action is going to help a little bit with terminal space, but isn't going to be like a huge difference maker one way or another, because you're going to have to support it as if it didn't anyway. But what about setting this up to trigger more shuffles? So first of all, like, if you're starting from a clean shuffle, you're not going to trigger any shuffles unless you either gain a card or have some kind of discard effect in your deck. So that's worth keeping in mind. Like, if you need to generate favors, you need to have some way of setting this up. It's kind of like Swashbuckler in that sense, except where Swashbuckler wants to be played before that happens, Emissary wants to be played like before that happens, in the sense that Swashbuckler, you want to like play before you get to the end of the shuffle so that you have the discard pile there. Emissary needs the discard pile there, but it wants to, be across the shuffle rather than before the shuffle, which is a narrower condition than Swashbuckler. So you can think of this as like harder to set up than Swashbuckler. And Swashbuckler is not trivial to set up. I mean, it can be, but so like Haven would be an example of a card that will combine pretty well with Emissary and would potentially allow for multiple Emissary triggers, because if you can like discard with Haven, well, not easily though. You still need to be able to discard enough cards. No, actually, it doesn't matter. Oh, right. Okay, unlike so one way in which this is easier to set up than Swashbuckler is that it doesn't matter if you sort of overdraw your shuffle. So long as you have anything in your discard pile, like, you can play a Haven, discard a card, play an Emissary, draw it, trigger the Emissary. Play another Haven, discard a card, play another Emissary, draw it, trigger it. Because all of that matters is that you shuffled at least one card. And it doesn't matter that you've overdrawn it. It doesn't matter that you won't have a discard pile at the end of it, or that it was like deterministic what you would draw, whatever. All that matters is that you drew at least, or that you shuffled at least one card. Shuffled in quotes. So, and the fact that it's non-terminal means you could just be like Haven for buy Emissary, Haven for buy Emissary, Haven for buy Emissary, boom, 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 boom. So maybe it actually isn't quite as bad as I was thinking. I mean, you still need some card that has some that that kind of an effect, but like you can warehouse with an empty deck, throw 3 cards in your discard, Emissary, draw them back up, get your favors. Yeah, and that's in some ways easier to set up than Swashbuckler, actually, because it doesn't care about, like, you don't need to do it like early in the shuffle such that you aren't triggering the shuffle. You can do it right at the end of the shuffle. Okay, so long as you get some kind of discard in your deck, you're fairly likely to be able to set this up. That is now what I'm thinking. So it'd be pretty strong. I mean, you know, if there were, this will not be printed, but if there were a 5-cost action that just said +3 cards on it, you would buy it like a fair amount of the time, because even though it's not as good as Smithy or these other Smithy variants, it's still like it's draw. You know, you got to get draw. So like obviously, you know, Emissary is going to be relevant from that anyway. But in terms of, you know, comparing its secondary effect to other secondary effects, I mean, obviously, again, it's going to depend on the allies, but I think it's going to be like doable enough that is not going to be so bad to make work, and then as a result, it will probably compare favorably to a fair number of the 5-cost smithies. Okay, Galleria. 5-cost action, +3 coins. This turn, when you gain a card costing 3 or 4, +1 buy. Okay. This does include during your buy phase, so you can chain buy 3 or 4s with this in play. But it has to be a 3 or a 4 specifically, which is a little awkward. You can also use, you know, some kind of workshop type card to give yourself extra buys. This is probably usually worse than if it just said +3 coins, +1 buy, which is not that good for a 5-cost action, but there are going to be cases where this gives you a ton of gains. The combination with livery is funny, because you get like, you can buy anything, you get the horse, and then that gives you the buy. If you have a bunch of liveries in play, you get a bunch of buys. But yeah, it has more upside than if it just said +3 coins, +1 buy. But it also has more restrictions. And I think this is going to be like a somewhat niche card. I don't see it being centralizing very often. Like compared to like Sacred Grove, for example, like a lot of the time I think you would prefer to have Sacred Grove just to reliably have the buy. Like if you're just like, I want to be able to double province, this isn't going to help you double province, really. I mean, it might if you have, you know, 19, 20, 21 coins and you have some 3 or 4 costs that you want to. But then you actually no, because even then you buy your 3 or 4 costs and now you have an extra buy to buy the province. You still can't buy the second province. If you have a gainer, like, then okay. But yeah, I think it's going to be somewhat niche. All right, Guildmaster, 5-cost action liaison, +3 coins. This turn, when you gain a card, +1 favor. Okay. So, well, this once again is going to depend on the allies. You gain any card though, but it's not helping you gain cards. Not really. I mean, it's helping you afford cards, but it's not giving you any additional gains. There are allies that are going to help solve that problem. So like, is it like Band of Nomads that gives you +buy? I think that if you like, you play this, you buy something to get a favor, you spend the favor with Band of Nomads to get a buy, you buy something, you get a favor, you spend the favor with Band of Nomads to get a buy. So like, at least in that case, you can essentially have as many buys as you want. So long as you've got Guildmaster in play. This is cool art, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. Probably there are other cards with cool art, and I just haven't paid attention because I'm thinking about the functionality of the card, but for whatever reason, this just like the little halo effect, the lighting, something. I don't know. It's cool. Anyway, yeah, really just going to depend on the allies. We're going to have to go back through these when we see all the allies, but I mean, I suspect this is going to be like pretty good as terminal golds go, but hard to evaluate right now. Highwayman, we've seen before. I don't think I've actually really played with it. Something that I did not mention in my previous video, or I covered this, is that this blocks crown. So it's not just like, oh, I play a copper and it does nothing, whatever, or I play a gold, ow, -3 coins. You can actually block an action with this. It's pretty nasty. So yeah, but yeah, I don't really have anything else to say about this because I haven't really played with it. Hunter, I don't actually quite remember what I said about this, but it seems pretty good to me at this point. Like, the common case of like I can draw an action and a treasure, like it's not helping you increase the number of actions in your hand, but it is still good draw. Even better like late in the game when you're using it to get victory cards out of the way. And there's other effects that you can combine it with to increase the number of actions in your hand if that's something that is important, like discard, or like not just straight discard, but like sifting effects like warehouse or whatever. If you draw, if you play like 3 hunters and draw 3 actions and 3 treasures, then you play a warehouse and you discard the 3 treasures and keep 3 actions, like, obviously that would work, for example. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good card. You're not usually going to want to use this as your only or maybe even primary source of draw, but as like in combination with other things, I think it'll be good. Modify, another card that we've seen. I mean, I think it's good. I do think that the delayed draw on the cantrip mode is awkward, but the flexibility, it's still worth it for sure. And like, I guess the big thing is that compared to upgrade and junk dealer, you just need to be you can't do the YOLO play, which I guess in some ways it's kind of nice because you don't have to worry about what happens if the yellow goes wrong. You're not going to want to get a ton of these. I guess that's one thing I picked up on, because the cantrip mode doesn't give you any benefit, and you only want so many remodels in your deck. So you're, gonna probably only want like 2, maybe 3 of these tops in most cases. Skirmisher. I have played quite a few games with this card. I have found myself, now granted this is against Lord Rat, doing a lot of like buy Skirmisher to activate Skirmisher. It's not a very efficient way to ramp payload, obviously, as a 5-cost peddler, but the attack does seem pretty good. But I would really probably want to play with it against a human player before I made any definitive conclusions there. So not too much new to say about this, I don't think. Specialist. Looks like they're a shoe specialist. You may play an action or treasure from your hand, choose one, play it again, or gain a copy of it. Okay. So it's kind of bad Disciple, which is, I mean, Disciple's a really good card, so 5-cost Throne variant, or really it's a 5-cost Crown variant, if anything. Seems good to me. I mean, it's a little overcosted as a Throne variant. Like, if you're, that is to say, you know, it's more expensive than Throne Room. If you're just playing it as a Throne Room, like, that's, you know, not ideal, but Throne Room at 5 is still a card that you would want. Like, there's plenty of times, of course, when you get Crown and you have no intention to crown a treasure, like, ever. You're just using it as a way to throw in action cards. And the ability to gain cards, like, it's probably mostly better than Crown. Like, Crown, the fact that Crown can play the treasure in your buy phase means that it's non-terminal when it does that, right? And Specialist doesn't have that advantage, but being able to gain cards mostly seems better to me than that. I think, like, it's just not that common that you care so much about crowning a treasure anyway. Like, Platinum, you would, sure, but other than that, you know, that's mostly a consolation prize. I guess, like, Capital would be, but Specialist, I mean, Specialist can still crown the Capital, it just can't do it non-terminally. So this card seems good to me. I mean, Throne variants are usually good, and being able to gain copies of the card seems really nice. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems quite strong. Swap. I think this one, when I initially reviewed it, I overlooked that it gains the card to your hand, which is a huge difference. So there's been discussion on the Dominion Discord that this card is just absolutely insane. I don't really see it that way. It's good, but to me, it mostly feels like a smoothing card. Like, for example, I played a board with Conclave and some terminal draw where an Artisan, actually, where, you know, like, Conclave is, as a village, can be pretty awkward, because, you know, there's the need for uniques, and, you know, if you get too many conclaves or not enough conclaves, your turn can kind of fall apart. And Swap really helped with that. You know, like, you know, if I had excess conclaves, I could turn the conclaves into one of the uniques that I hadn't played with a conclave. If I had not enough conclaves, I could turn one of the terminals into a conclave and then, like, get it back later with Swap. So, you know, that was really nice, but it wasn't like bonkers. There are obviously going to be some cases where this is bonkers, where you have something like, you know, a horse gainer, where you can, you know, swap the horse into some card, and then if it's like, you know, if it's like you have a livery in play and you play Swap and you exchange your horse for something and you get the horse back because, you know, of the livery effect, like, that's obviously really nice. Or like the you know, cavalry, you get you play Swap, you return a card, you gain cavalry, then, you know, you draw some cards, and then you, like, can like, first of all, you've done that non-terminally, right? And you didn't have to, like, spend your money on it or anything. You just turn Swap into, like, an activated menagerie, and then, you know, if you the card like the cavalry that you just gain goes into your hand because you swapped into it, which means you can then like swap that out if you have another swap for something else, or you can immediately play the cavalry to get the horses, and I mean there's some pretty nutty stuff you can do there, but I guess I don't know how common that sort of thing is going to be, but so far my experience has not been that this card is just like totally busted or whatever. It's been, it's a good card and it can do some cool stuff, but it's not just like totally insane. But perhaps I just haven't seen the right boards yet. All right. Marquee, 6 cost action, +1 buy, +1 card per card in your hand, discard down to 10 cards in hand. Okay. So if you play this with a 5-card hand, it's just like draw 4 +1 buy. That's nothing to complain about. You're not even discarding cards until you play this card with 7 cards in hand. Like, because if you play it with 6 cards in hand, like you have 6 cards in hand, you play the marquee, you're down to 5 cards, you draw 5 more cards, you're at 10 cards exactly. You have a 7-card hand, you play marquee, you draw 6 cards, you're at 12, you discard down to 10. In that case, marquee is a smithy, which is like a smithy with some sifting, which is like still good. So, I guess it's also got the ++, so it's more like Margrave, but without the attack. Whatever. The point is, this is a really good draw card. Obviously, you don't want like a ton of these because at some point it stops effectively drawing cards. But although you can kind of run a very different sort of draw to X thing than what we're used to seeing from draw to X, where you play your village, you play your marquee, you drop to 8, you play your village again, you play or a couple of villages, and then you play like some disappearing payload card, and you drop back down to 7 or 6 cards, and then you play another marquee, and like there's a thing you can do there where you're doing DTX, but it's draw to 10 instead of draw to like 6 or 5 or 6 or 7, which is gonna feel pretty different. And obviously the fact that like marquee like it's still like it's okay. I'm trying to say you don't necessarily need to reduce hand size very much, and in fact you don't want to reduce it too much. Like if you play marquee with a hand size like from a hand of 3 cards, for example, and you're only drawing 2 cards, like then now it's a I guess it's a silk merchant, which is still all right, but but for what you invested in it and what its potential is, that's not really what you want. So like you don't want to drop like way down. So it's more of like a sort of like a seesaw thing than like a normal draw to X deck. But what that means is that unlike a normal draw to X deck, you don't have like, it's not like, oh man, I really need to get rid of all these treasures, or oh, what am I going to do with all these green cards? Like, it's fine. Like you can have some treasures and some green in your deck, and it's not really going to break the ability to draw with the marquee. Of course, the other option, potentially is that you use other draw cards instead, or you can just play with a hand size of 10. Like, that's pretty good. But like even without having it like be like a draw to X deck, you can just sort of have like be working with a hand size of 10 the way you might if you were like playing a tactician deck or something, and that's still like a lot of cards. But as opposed to playing marquee and then playing some other draw cards and drawing up to 13 or 14 or whatever. But yeah, I mean this will fit into a lot of different types of decks. I guess, is where I'm going with this. Like, it actually does work in a draw to X context, even though it's going to be like a different spin on it than typical draw to X. It works in a just like draw up to real big hand size. It works in a sort of like draw up to more like of a, you know, big but not enormous hand size. You can combine this with City Quarter, like where you like play 1 or 2 marquees and then you just go play your City Quarters. You know, this just seems like a card that you're very frequently going to want at least 1 or 2 of, if not a bunch. The fact that it has plus buy also is relevant there. The sifting effect on it also means that, like, you know, if you're using this for some kind of draw to X-ish type thing where you want to build up your hand size, reduce it, build it up again, you can, like, even if you already have 10 cards in your hand, you play a marquee, you draw up to like 18 cards because you had 9 cards after you played it. You're gonna have to discard 8 cards, but like, well, you're really gonna find, you know, your festivals or whatever at that point, right? So like, you know, you're not gonna have trouble getting the green and the yellow out of your hand if that's what you need to do. This just seems like, I mean, it's expensive. Don't get me wrong, but the effect is really powerful. It seems like really, really good, and yeah, that's just it's a good card. One thing to watch out for is hand size attacks, and this is the same thing is true of Madman, of course, but Madman has plus action on it. So Madman, I mean, on the one hand, because Madman is a one-shot, playing it when you're, you know, when you've been militiaed or whatever feels really bad. But on the other hand, you're not worried about lining it up with a village. Marquee, playing that out of a, you know, a hand where you've gotten militiaed is going to feel very bad. So, you know, that's something to watch out for. If you're playing this out of a hand of like a 4 cards, and it's, you know, the Margrave without the attack, that's fine. I wouldn't get too distressed about that. But yeah, I really don't want to be playing this out of a hand size of 3. Okay, on to the allies, and that is all that we've got left. Not that there's not plenty of them to go through and to talk about, but there are no other landscapes. So Architects Guild, we've seen this before. I think I actually did mention in like the next day's video that the mistake I had made of this, where I had overlooked that you can chain it, so you can gain, you know, you can buy a province, spend 2 favors to gain a King's Court, spend 2 more favors to gain a captain, spend 2 more favors to gain a lab, blah, 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 blah. I haven't actually played with Architects Guild, so I don't really have too much to say about it beyond what I had already discussed. Band of Nomads, same thing. Have I played with this? I think I played with it like once. It's really hard to get like a specific ally when you don't have any control over the kingdom generation. There's a lot of them, and you're not even guaranteed to get one at all, and etc. etc. But yeah, so I don't know that I have anything new to say about that one either. Cave Dwellers, I think I may have reviewed this one the first day before I actually kind of registered the fact that you start the game with a favor. So, you know, this you can use to trigger a shuffle on turn 2, like has your turn 1 purchase in it, or you can use it on turn 1 to like fish to try to hit 5. So there's some really relevant stuff in the opening with this one. But yeah, again, not anything really new to say about that otherwise. Circle of Witches. Look at this art. This is nuts. Like, what a camera angle. Anyway, after you play a liaison, you may spend 3 favors to have each other player gain a curse. Whoa. After you play a liaison. Okay. That is... Is there a way to... No. Okay. Not a way to, like, search for liaison in here. Just, like, see what all the liaisons do with that. So... Realistically, with Circle of Witches, you're trying to get to about 15 favors. I mean, more if your opponent doesn't... Well, maybe I should say 18 favors, like, so you can try to win the curse split. Assuming there's no other cursor. If there is another cursor, I guess in a lot of cases you're probably going to prefer to just play with that, because it's probably going to be more efficient. 3 favors is kind of a lot, feels like. You know, and then if you're playing with, like, Importer, it's like, well, I get to curse you once. Okay. Assuming you get the Importer, which maybe you don't, just to give out 1 curse, but you otherwise want Importer anyway. But yeah, so maybe you're aiming to get to like 18 favors or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look back to the liaisons. It's gonna be tough to like go through all of this way. But maybe it would be a good idea to look at all the liaisons right now to remind ourselves, like, okay, what cards are we considering? So Bobble, Sycophant, let's see, none of these are these. Importer, that's like simpler ones. Underling, of course. Student, broker. Contract, emissary, guildmaster. That's it. Okay. So I'm afraid that if I go through each ally and say, like, okay, this is what I think about this, you know, paired up with this liaison, this liaison, this liaison, that's going to take too long. So I guess I will refrain from doing that, but part of me wants to. Yeah, this one, but yeah, this one's, it's expensive, so I think a lot of these liaisons that aren't, like, very good at generating a lot of favors, it's gonna be tough to give out, like, a full set of curses with them. Right, City-State we've seen before. Just, you know, I already mentioned that this is nuts with Importer. Yeah. That's, I think I'll just stick with that as, as my assessment for now. Coastal Haven, this we've also seen before. This is the save one. Crafters Guild we have also seen. This is the Armory one. Okay, Desert Guides, this is a new one. At the start of your turn, you may spend a favor to discard your hand and draw 5 cards. Repeat as desired. Ooh, okay, so guides right in the name. That's what it does. Compared to actually getting a guide, I would say, like, getting an Underling for this looks probably generally better. Because, you know, you can stockpile the favors, like, without, you know, if you need to get like 2 or 3 guides to like reliably have a guide on the mat, like by comparison, you can probably more easily stockpile favors with even just 1 underling, let alone 2. Good hand size attack counter. You can use this on outpost, like all the sort of normal guide stuff. But you know, like I think the increased flexibility is going to be really nice. Now, if you're using, you know, not underling, I always use that as my reference point because it's just the easiest one to think about. But if you're using not underling, there are definitely going to be cases where this is harder to use than guide because you're going, like, you know, with broker or student, you've got to trash. Obviously, with importer, you can use it only, you know, a maximum of 5 times, so choose wisely. You know, it's going to be limited with sycophant. What else? Guildmaster. Guildmaster, you should, you know, generally be able to get at least 1 per turn if you have deck control. That should be fine. Emissary, harder to say, but if you can activate that, you're probably good to go. And actually, the effect of Desert Guides will actually help with that because you'll have cards in your discard pile. I said I wasn't going to go through every single one of them. Dang it. So let's not do that. Family of Inventors. Yeah, this was the one where I didn't realize when I was first going through this that the discounting affected both players. So it's still totally unclear to me. I haven't played with this. It's still totally unclear to me whether this is even like something you want to do or when you would want to do it or what. I don't know. It's like you're going to accumulate favors and you're going to spend them to do something that benefits both you and your opponent. Like, I don't know. And it's only 1 per buy phase. So you can't do something like stock up a whole bunch of favors and then, like, you know, be like, okay, now I'm going to pile out by like discounting, you know, this to 0 and this to 0 and this to 0. Like, you can't do it all at once like that. Yeah, I mean, you can do a little bit of that, right? You're gonna like have to watch out for pilouts where like 1 card is cheaper, but that's it. So you can do some really rude stuff with this too. Like people were talking about, you can discount gold so that people can't remodel gold into province. You can discount, you know, like Band of Misfits so that the cards that your opponent that was playing that cost less than Band of Misfits now cost the same, and their Band of Misfits doesn't work anymore. You can probably, I think, let's see, Captain is just 4 or less. It doesn't matter what Captain cost. Overlord is 5 or less. So with Overlord and Captain, you can enable more stuff, but you can't disable stuff. What else cares about stuff like that? I don't know, but there's some stuff like that you can do, and if you are going for like a different strategy than your opponent with some of those cards, you know, like that can be a case where the effect can help you more than your opponent or hurt your opponent more than it hurts you, sort of thing. Fellowship of Scribes. After playing an action, if you have 4 or fewer cards in hand, you may spend a favor for +1 card. Oh. That's cool. It's sort of Drata X-ish. Yeah. I don't think you can, like, you can't like repeat this until you have 5 cards in hand. Which is unfortunate, but you can sort of maintain a steady state of like 4 to 5 cards in your hand if you have enough favors. Probably gonna be difficult to generate that many favors without Underling. Like, is there any? what else? Because like one of the questions is what generates a lot of favors other than Underling? Like Bobble and Contract can both, in theory, generate unlimited favors. Guildmaster can too. Emissary can. Broker and Student would need to be combined with some kind of gainer to generate unlimited favors. Sycophant would need a way to pull it out of the trash, though it can still generate a lot of favors. Guess that's, yeah, Importer obviously is very limited. Guess that's it. All right. Forest Dwellers. At the start of your turn, you may spend a favor to look at the top 3 cards of your deck, discard any number, and put the rest back in any order. Okay, so that gives you some sifting. I mean, this is going to be pretty relevant in the opening, right? Like, you can trigger a shuffle either turn 1 or turn 2, so you can either... if you do this turn 1, you can just discard all 3 cards at the top of your deck, buy something, and get it into your shuffle. If you do it turn 2, you can guarantee that you see your turn 1 purchase on turn 3. So like if you do it turn 1, you might see your turn 1 purchase on turn 2. If you do it turn 2, you guarantee you see it on turn 3. Either one of those is pretty powerful of an effect. And then, you know, you can continue to accelerate shuffles and as well as giving yourself some reliability, like try to top deck something good. So yeah, it seems like a good one for sure. We've seen Gang of Pickpockets before, not much else to say about this. Island Folk, we've also seen. You know, we have a little bit better of an idea now of how realistic it is to just like keep getting these extra turns. I mean, most of the liaisons are going to be able to get you an Island Folk turn fairly often, I would say. It's like even sort of the worst case scenario for like Guildmaster, for example, or some of the others that are like not necessarily going to generate a ton of favors. Like, so let's take Guildmaster though. You know, if this is your terminal, you play Guildmaster, you buy a card. Like, you have no other gains. So you play Guildmaster, you buy a card. Next turn, you play Guildmaster, you buy a card. You do that 5 turns in a row. Okay, now you Island Folk, you get a favor back on your Island Folk turn, and now you're doing it every 4 turns. So, like, every 4 turns, well, it's not as good as, you know, every turn, obviously, but it's still, you know, like, gonna be, like, on a board where you're so gain limited anyway, and you know, so on, like, that would still be worth investing in Guildmaster for, I think. And usually the situation is going to be better than that. League of Bankers we've seen before. I still think it's slow and not very good. League of Shopkeepers. If you play a liaison, after you play a liaison, if you have 5 or more favors, +1 coin, and if 10 or more, +1 action and +1 buy. Okay. So after you play a liaison, so this specifically is a way to get your liaisons to start generating a coin, an action, and a buy. This really wants to look at each individual favor. I mean, each individual liaison. So, like, getting an extra coin off of Bobble, that's actually kind of huge. Like, and I did forget to mention Bobble when I was going through these earlier. But what was the other? It was buy and coin, and then action buy, right? So Bobble, you take your 5 favors pretty much as fast as you can, and now this is like giving you silver with another benefit every time, and then if you keep taking favors, keep taking favors, you get to 10 favors. The action is irrelevant unless you have a way to play the treasure in your action phase, but which would be kind of cool with Storyteller. Like if your village was like Storyteller Bobble or like Black Market Bobble or something. It'd be pretty funny. But or Villa. I mean, not that Villa isn't a village anyway, but Cavalry. Cavalry, the village. But yeah, so if you get the coin and the buy, now you've got 2 coins and a buy already, and you can also... Well, I'm assuming you're picking plus coin every time off a Bobble with this. Seems kind of weird not to. Well, you're not... You're going to... At that point, you don't have any need for more favors. You're never going to pick the favors. So effectively, you're going to go... You're going to take 1 top deck, and then the rest of your Bobbles are plus 2 coins, plus 2 buys. For two coins, like, that's good. Sycophant... You get plus 1 coin off of this. Well, it is better. Plus 1 coin, plus 1 buy. It is better. I don't know. It's a little hard to imagine, like, that it's worth investing in, like, getting all those favors just to upgrade Sycophant, but I don't know. Importer. So you're going to start with plus 1 coin on Importer, and that's going to be that. Okay. Whatever. I mean, it's something. Underling. Now that is going to be... Oh, not that one. Plus 1 coin, plus 1 action, plus 1 buy. So once you get to 10 favors, this is plus 1 card, plus 2 actions, plus 1 coin, and plus 1 buy. So it is the long-awaited market village. Yeah, that's what it is. So you can turn Underling into your village and into a market, like, yeah, market village. Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, it becomes a peddler first. It gets the coin first, and it gets the action on the buy later. Student can become it becomes a village eventually, and it gets a coin by... I don't know. I guess that could be relevant, like, if it's the only option for a village, but it would be pretty sad if it was, I think. I mean, you don't... Oh, you do have to trash a card, too. Yeah, probably not going to be worth worrying about too much with Student. You're just going to use it for trashing and then move on with your life. Broker, getting plus action on Broker, that does seem nice. Now this is much more similar to Apprentice. Though taking favors off a Broker, I maintain, is almost always going to be awkward. Even on boards where you really want the favors, it's still going to be awkward. But specifically on a board with this liaison, it's like, you do all that so that you can upgrade your Broker, but then why? Because you want to trash other cards with the Broker for these other effects, and then, like, well, why didn't you just do that to begin with? So I don't know that you would bother to worry about it with Broker. Contract. Sure. Now it's a gold. Now it gives you plus buy. Great. Yeah. Do it. Emissary. Emissary can sometimes be a village. Yeah, I mean, you'll want to activate your Emissary to get that effect. Even the plus 1 coin will be nice. Guildmaster. Hey, you can make your Guildmasters non-terminal. And getting plus buy on Guildmaster also seems pretty relevant. especially, and well, at the point at which you get the plus buy, you don't care about the favors anymore. But still, like getting plus buy, like that, maybe that's the only way to get plus buy on the board. And that is it. Okay, I will try not to do this for all of the combinations, but there's like 200 of them or something. Market towns. At the start of your buy phase, you may spend a favor to play an action card from your hand. Repeat as desired. Oh, okay. So this is toil, but with favor instead of coins as the cost of doing business. So you can have a buy phase engine in the extreme case where you get a bunch of favors and then you like play cards. It's worth noting that this is at the start of your buy phase, which means you don't have to have played all your treasures yet, unlike toil, which means it's not actually useless to like play draw cards this way. So you can, you know, spend a favor, play a draw card, spend a favor, play another draw card, you know, spend. You do have to have them at the start of your buy phase. So you can't use Bobble or Contract to generate favors that you use to play actions in the same buy phase. But you can use Underling or other action favor generators that aren't conditional on something. Like, I mean, Guildmaster won't work because you need to gain a card. Well, I mean, it'll work if you have a workshop, I guess. But yeah, like you could like play all your underlings like in your buy phase and then use that to play other cards. So yeah, you can build a buy phase engine, or I mean you can, you know, more commonly just use this to like as your village. So yeah, it seems pretty cool. I like it. Mountain Folk. Start of your turn, you may spend 5 favors for +3 cards. Okay, so that's certainly going to be something you want to generate favors for. +3 cards, that's great. It does seem a little expensive compared to Island Folk, I have to say. Like, a whole extra turn versus +3 cards? I think I'd rather have the extra turn. But, of course, they're not competing with each other. Here's their question. When do you want to use your importer favors for +3 cards? Are you going to do it turn 1? Are you going to do it turn 2? Probably going to do it one of those 2 times. If you do turn 1, you're going to hit a minimum of 5 coins. That's only if you're quite unlucky. Well, or lucky, depending on what you want. But, like, it's unlikely that you only hit 5. Like, you're very likely to hit 6. You're not very likely to hit 7. Like, to hit 5, you have to have 2 coppers on the bottom of your deck. I could try to do the math on that, but it's 7 and 10 times 6 and 9. So I think that's more likely than I was thinking, actually. That you only hit 5. So that's 42 in 90. So it's a little bit more than, or it's a little bit less than a 50% chance that you only hit 5. And then the odds that you hit 7 are 3 in 10 times 2 in 9, so 6 in 90. And then the odds that you hit 6 are also 42 in 90? Huh. That's surprising. I feel like I might be doing something wrong with the math there. It doesn't seem like the odds of 5 and 6 should be the same. They are. Well, In any case, so right, if you want to open, want to open with a 6 cost, like, you probably want to try to do this turn 1. If you want to open with a 5, you probably also want to do this turn 1. The situation in which you want to do this turn 2 is where you either have a 5/2, so you get the 5, and then you trigger the shuffle turn 2, and you try to see the 5 on turn 2, or you're fine with like getting like a cheaper card and then trying to see that on turn 2. I think it's going to be rare that you don't want to do this one of the first 2 turns because like getting a good card into your shuffle, especially like a 5 cost, is just so valuable. And like, what are you waiting for? But yeah, beyond that, obviously you try to get favors with the other liaisons, and you try to draw cards, and it's great. Order of Astrologers. When shuffling, you may pick 1 card per favor you spend to go on top. Okay, so this is potentially Superstar chart. Seems good. You can top deck your one of your opening buys on turn, like going into turn 3. You can do some cool shenanigans with like gain and play, or other like mid-turn shuffling things where, like, if you're using a card like Wishing Well or Wisp or whatever, you can potentially guarantee like the cards line up the way that you want them to. You can do some like what would otherwise be riskier shuffle triggers where it's like, okay, I gain some horses with my paddock, and then like I want to see, like, I have this, like, I don't know, I have a couple silvers in there or something, and I want to draw them, and I want to top deck the horses. Like, you just do exactly that. Like, and not worry about, oops, I drew the horses, now I have to play the horses, and now I don't have the horses anymore. Like, oh, dang. Like, no, I'm just going to get my silvers, and the horses are going to be on top of the deck, and it's going to be great. Obviously, just being able to make sure that you see your good cards at the top of each shuffle, your travelers, your junkers, your trashers, blah blah blah, useful. Like, yeah, this is strong effect. Like, compared to Star Chart, I think this is better just because of the flexibility, like, to accumulate the favors when it doesn't matter, and then like spend a bunch of them when it does. If the general test is like, am I picking up Hireling for this? Yes, or Underling. Sorry, am I picking up Underling for this? Yes, I am. Order of Masons. Right. So this is the top decking, and this is the I don't want this card in my shuffle at all. This is also good. It's more favor efficient, obviously at the cost of not being as precise, but I could actually see this ultimately being even better. Like, so for example, if I think I talked about this before, the idea that like, you can, going into turn 3, you can pick 2 cards, hold them out of your shuffle. Now you have a 10 card deck, and you guarantee that you see your good cards turn 3 or turn 4, which is basically just as good as making sure that you see them turn 3 in a lot of cases. But like, it does that for both of your opening buys rather than just one of them, right? And you can sort of extend that logic out and like construct powerful shuffles. I mean, depending on how many favors you have, I mean, you could create some pretty crazy stuff where you like just have like a huge chunk of your deck that you leave in your discard pile. You need a lot of favors to do it, but yeah, you could do some pretty cool stuff with this for sure. I mean, both of these seem good. Peaceful Cult. Yeah, this one. The I think is ideally combined with another Trasher. Like if Underling is on the board, but there's also, I don't know, like a 4-cost Tempo Trasher, maybe like Bounty Hunter or Priest or something like that, then you probably just open that card and Underling, and then you use your Tempo Trasher to like in conjunction with the Underling to just get thin quickly. And like, I mean, obviously if you only have, if this is the only trashing available, you'll do that, but I don't think it's like going to be the case that you want to skip other trashing necessarily because of this, because you do need to generate the favors to do it, and that's not going to be like instantaneous or anything. So yeah. But like, obviously being able to trash a card like before your first shuffle is really, really good. Plateau Shepherds. I did play with this a little bit. It does have some real crazy scoring potential. So definitely something to pay attention to and to potentially even build around. Because turning estates into duchies, they're a lot cheaper than duchies. And turning whatever, and any good cheap or good 2-cost card into like an obelisk pile, that's potentially a very powerful effect. Obviously you also do need the favors for it, but that's not felt like too big of a limitation to me for the most part. I mean, if you're playing with Importer or whatever, then it's just like, okay, well, pick 5 of them, and then it's not going to be so insane. Trapper's Lodge. When you gain a card, you may spend a favor to put it onto your deck. Okay. We not already... I could have sworn we already had some other top-decking thing. I guess that was the Armory one. Well, yeah, I mean, this is another thing that seems pretty strong. You can much more easily do gain and play stuff with this. You can, just top deck your buys and guarantee that you kick off the next turn. Yeah, lots of good stuff that you can do. That just, seems good. Woodworkers Guild. At the start of your buy phase, you may spend a favor to trash an action card from your hand. If you did, gain an action card. Okay, so this is kind of like Advance. I guess it's a lot like Advance, except instead of spending a buy, you're spending a favor. So, and you can do some of the same early game stuff that you do with Advance, like advance your Necropolis, or open with a cheap action card that you don't care about and then advance it into whatever. It doesn't even have the limitation of up to 6 that Advance has, so you can use it to gain a King's Court. I mean, not that you want to do that with your Necropolis in the opening, but you can use it to gain a Forge. Yeah, it's Advance. So, except slightly less restricted. You can use it to gain an Overlord or City Quarter. So I guess it's more unrestricted in but yeah, I mean, a lot of what you're doing with this is going to be thinking about the sorts of things you would do with Advance, like paying attention to like Trasher benefit stuff, like with, well, probably not with Rats, because that doesn't really like drawing a card at that point isn't so helpful. Although it is before you played your treasures, so it works a little bit better. But like, Catacombs or Squire, things like that. Okay, so before I wrap up here, I guess I want to see if I can do like one more run through and figure out like, okay, can we say anything more definitive about some of these liaisons now that we've seen all of the favors? Let's go look at Bobble. So Bobble, I think enough of these favors are good enough, or sorry, enough of these allies are good enough that even though I think Bobble sort of in a vacuum is kind of on the weak side, that you're almost always going to want Bobble in your deck. Like, I mean, let's just look at like which one are you not gonna want Bobble for? Like, you probably want it for this. You probably want it for this. Want it for that. Probably want it for that. I mean, maybe not if there's another cursor, but want it for that. We want it for that. Probably want it for that. Probably want it for that. Who the heck knows? Yeah, probably want it for that. You probably want it for that. I mean, you get the idea. Like, it's just everything. Sycophant still seems awkward to me. If there's trash for benefit, though, then this becomes a lot more doable. Where you just, you gain the Sycophant, you trash the Sycophant, you just have favors. This could be especially fun with the advanced one. Where you like buying Sycophants to gain favors so that you can spend the favors to trash Sycophants into other actions to gain even more favors. Could be cool. But this is one where it's less clear to me that you're going to gain this just to have like any of these allies. I could see there being a significant number of cases where you're like, I don't really know if it's worth putting this card into my deck, for like a bounded number of favors. Importer, we don't really need to talk about. Underling, again, almost all of these you're going to want Underling for. Underling is going to be the star of the show. I guess League of Bankers is the one that stands out as like it's frequently going to be the case that's not very important to accumulate favors for the purpose of League of Bankers. And then Plateau Shepherds, depending on like, I mean, depending on the number of gains, I guess. Like on a board with very limited gains, you don't really care that much about Plateau Shepherds because being able to gain estates instead of duchies might just not be that important. Like it might not be worth spending your limited gains to gain the liaisons to generate the favors so that you can use estates instead of duchies for scoring. But most of the time, you're still going to want to invest in that. Family of Inventors, of course, it's hard to say. Like, having the option will be nice, but I doubt it's going to be worth heavily investing into just because, like, you can only spend one of them per turn, and the effect is, like, not even obviously beneficial, so... But yeah, most of these are just good, and you're going to want underlings for them. Student, you're often going to take just because it's trasher anyway, and so then, you might as well, leverage the favors. The interesting question questions, I guess, are when are you going to want student when you have better trashing otherwise anyway, and when are you going to try to feed student treasures in order to get favors? And that, I think, would require going through all of these individually, and I don't really want to do that, but I think I will just say that is, I think, the thing to focus on in terms of student. Broker, kind of a similar question. I continue to think that using broker to gain favors is awkward. However, some of these allies are definitely powerful enough that you got to do it. Island folk, like you got to do it. It's just too good. But like if broker is the only trashing, you know, obviously it gets awkward because you have to trash coppers and you can't even take any benefit off of that. But also like, if, you know, well, like you're trashing estates, you know, early on in the game, you're going to have to choose potentially between like, do I take a couple of favors for this like long-term benefit, or do I just trash for coins so I can buy a 5? Like, it could be tough. Or do I draw cards for cycling and potentially still be able to hit 5? So, like, if broker's trashing an estate and you're taking neither cards nor actions, cards nor coins, if you're taking favors, like, it's gonna feel really bad unless those favors are immediately doing something really powerful. So then, you know, I kind of think, well, maybe you're like with student, you're gonna have to actually feed the broker other stuff in order to like really do the favors, and you're gonna have to build up, you know, in order to be able to do that. And like, I don't know, it's gonna be. I think it's going to be tough to make it work sometimes, if not frequently, with broker. But there are definitely going to be cases again where it's going to be worth it. Contract, yeah. I mean, it is expensive for a silver. But I mean, I think a lot of the cases, like the favors, are going to pay off, and the village effect is also going to be like, I mean, you know, if you're consistently drawing deck, you're not necessarily going to want to use it because you're going to want to play your contracts every turn rather than every other turn. But in the cases where, you know, you're not doing that yet, you know, you don't necessarily lose out on too much, and you can increase your, you know, reliability and stuff like that. Or maybe it is the only village. So I think, yeah, investing in this for the purpose of favors, I think you'll do it. I think the fact that it costs 5 is going to be a deterrent. So I think, like, you know, compared to Underling, you're definitely not going to do as much with contract as with Underling, but especially because Underling's not a stop card. But I still think contract is going to be worth it to get a lot of these favors just because the effects are good enough. Emissary, you're probably going to get kind of regardless of whether the favors are that valuable or not. I don't know how often the favors are going to move the needle on that. Like, I mean, I guess the most common case for it to move the needle is if you have another smithy alternative, but then like a lot of times probably what you end up doing is getting like 1 or 2 emissaries and then mostly the other one if you don't need or don't have a way to get a ton of favors from emissary, because it's not that easy to set up the shuffle triggering condition. But yeah, I think emissary is one of the ones that's going to be like the least influenced by the quality of the allies in terms of like what you're doing with the card. Guildmaster, yeah, I mean, I think Guildmaster, you're going to want to get to generate favors, but there are going to be boards where the terminal space doesn't like really let you do it, or like, you know, if it's like a, you know, if it's like a single terminal board, it's like gain limited, and you have to choose between I'm getting these favors or I'm getting like a second gain because I play like a plus buy card or a gainer, then a lot of the time I think you are, like, I mean, it depends on what the ally is, of course, but a lot of the time you probably end up not taking Guildmaster in that type of situation. But you know, I think it's still going to be worth it quite frequently. And sometimes it's going to solve its own problem by, like, you know, the favors or give you actions or buys or whatever. Cards. And I guess that's it for liaisons? Yeah, looks like it. All right, well, there you have it. Allies in a nutshell. 2.5 hour long nutshell. It's actually not as bad as I thought it would be, to be honest. I guess it helps that I had already gone through some of these things. Is there anything else I want to say before I wrap up? Maybe just talk about, like, I'm not going to try to say, like, here are, like, all of the best cards, but, like, what are some of the stronger ones that stand out to me? I think of the 4 split piles pretty comfortably. I feel like clashes are the strongest. Just because these Archer and Warlord attacks seem like something you're going to want to play with just like all the time. Territory seems like a really efficient source of VP, and Battle Plan is like, we'll have to see like how often you can activate it, but it seems like a good card. I think Sentinel is going to be a real standout card. You know, that's the trashing and the effective sifting that results from the trashing, I think, is going to be really nice. The reordering, you know, that it does. I mean, if you compare, like, okay, so admittedly, once you're done with trashing, if you compare this to Navigator, it's like none too exciting because it doesn't give you the coins. And Navigator isn't exactly a good card, but you're going to get the card anyway. So, like, compared to Navigator, like, the value you get out of the reordering is going to be higher because, like, it's like, well, I have the one anyway, so I can play it, and then I can, you know, make sure my Wishing Wells hit, or make sure my Seer hits, or whatever. So that's gonna be a really good card, I think. I mean, Underling is gonna be really strong. It's gonna give you favors. Favors are gonna be good. Innkeeper. I think this last effect, I think, is just going to be really strong in a lot of cases. Like, even though it reduces hand size, I think that is going to do a lot of work. Specialist seems really cool. I think that's going to be... It's not really going to make sense as like a first 5 in a lot of cases, unless you have like a really good, like, spammable 3 or 4 in your deck. But you know, if you can get it after you've got like a few good action cards in your deck, it's going to be like a very, very nice card. I mean, everyone's been talking about swaps, so I'm not going to bother to talk about that. Marquee seems really good to me. Like, it's just pretty insane amount of draw. And then for the allies, let's see. I don't know. So many of them are good. So many of them are good. It's almost easier to talk about the ones that I don't think are good. I mean, Gang of Pickpockets is like, it doesn't mean anything to talk about whether it's good, but I guess the question is, like, how often do you invest in liaisons in order to offset the Gang of Pickpockets? And I actually think not as often as a lot of these other ones. Like, I think discarding one card is not going to be like so bad. Like, if you think about Urchin, like, and then imagine, like, there's no mercenaries, there's just Urchin, like, you know, how harmful of an attack is that? It's not that bad. And then, like, League of Bankers, I think, is frequently just going to be, like, slow. But other than that... Oh, Family Inventors, of course, is just weird. But other than that, these are, like, all of these are good. Like, they're just all really good effects. Not equally so, but, like, so many of these, I think you're going to want to invest in in liaisons. I mean, more so Bobble hireling or Bobble underling contract. Emissary, Guildmaster. More so than these two, I think. I mean, it's hard to tell with Broker, because it's like, if you have like a gold gainer, like, okay, you can just get tons of favors off of your Broker, but yeah, I think like Underling, when we first saw Underling, it was like, well, okay, how many of these allies are going to be worth it? And now I'm looking at this as like Underling is going to be, the gain rate for Underling is going to be like, I don't know, 90+% of games or something like that. It's going to be really high because so many of these are worth getting an Underling for. Like, the only one that really stands out to me is like, I don't know if I'm going to bother to get an Underling for that, is League of Bankers. Even then, you still might do it if you have 3 and there's not like anything more exciting to get. Like, but it's not necessarily going to be something that's like worth focusing on, but like pretty much every other one. So yeah, Underling, good card. All right, that really will wrap it up for my allies' first impressions. If there's anything that gets revealed with the rule book when that gets released, I will try to at least put some comments in the video or something if I need to make any corrections to my understanding of any of the cards. But other than that, there is a tournament that's going to be running starting basically now for allies, like a heavy allies thing where it's like you start out and you play with like at least 1 and then at least 4 and then at least 7 or something like that cards as you progress through the set. It's something, maybe it's like 1, 3, 6 something. Anyway, so I'm going to be playing in that, so there'll be some actual allies gameplay coming up to my channel shortly. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Go check out the cards yourself on the Dominion client, and until next time, which I mean the next set coming out in a couple of years, maybe, who knows.